Hey everybody, welcome back to Quali-Tea time! We have a lot of news, oh boy. So, the first thing is various oddities, which I gotta say has kind of become my main project in a lot of regards. It's picking up a lot of attention, like, oh boy. It has had its first mod review video, which unfortunately is in Spanish, so I only know a fraction of what's actually said in it. But it goes through most of the release version 3.1 and shows off a bunch of stuff. Don't know how much it actually talks about, but it looks pretty sweet. And we've also had like an actual written blog review on Minecraft6.com, and that's had a couple thousand people looking at that at least, so wow. And also currently version 3.1, which is the current release version, has more downloads on the current release than every preceding version beta or release. So wow. It is currently, as I look at this, occupying about 47% of the total downloads of the entire mod. So, blimey. New beta release at least coming up on that fairly soon. Other than that, we also have Dailies by Daylight going well. We've had 2 videos out, well, 3 videos are out on that by the time you see this. And it has also been added to the Patreon rewards, so that is to say that any patron of any tier can now appear in the videos doing Survivor daily hunts, because Survivor daily hunts actually require more than one person. I can't really include people inside of the killer hunts, but the Survivor ones totally, absolutely can. So if you happen to play Dead by Daylight, you are very welcome to chug along on one of those. Also, speaking of patrons, new month, new rewards. It's now June, which means we have all new rewards refreshing, so consequently you can get all of your fresh access to your standard rewards, so such as custom voice clips for songs, ringtones, answering machine messages, hilarious memes. Almost anything is up for grabs. You just have to suggest, you just have to tell me, more or less, what to record. And I have veto power on things that I'm not going to do, like, for example, to Godwin this case a little bit, I won't do, like, Hitler speeches, and I won't do things laden with swearing and such, but I can do a lot of things. You can also get your VFX asset if you qualify for that, and you can also attend to the server events. And nothing written down just yet on when that will be this month. Obviously it's a busy month for me, but nonetheless. Also, by popular demand, the Foxel is now named Voxel. And we have a little bit of a feature going on today, which is that in around about 2013 or so, I made a magic deck, and it was one of my favourite magic decks ever made. It was Izzet Guttersnipe, and I looked it up recently because I was trying to find if I'd included a card in one of my decks, and I knew I had, but I couldn't figure out which one, so I went through basically all of them. And I found this one, which is Izzet Guttersnipe, and I also found this one, which is another one of my favourite ever decks. This is Kuldo Goblins, I believe. And I realised, for being 2 of my favourite decks, one of these has a much lower kind of like prestige case than the other. So, I picked up another deck box for it, over here. It's not quite, it's the exact same design, it's a slightly different material than that one. Anyways, let's go and have a look at what was actually in that deck, and just wonder if it was actually any good. So this deck probably had a different name back when I originally built it, but I now mostly refer to it as Izzet Guttersnipe. We'll see exactly why. Izzet refers to the fact that this is a blue-red deck, which in the Ravnican guild system, which is deep magic lore, is Izzet. And specifically, this is a blue-red control burn kind of deck. It's more control than anything else, but the fact of how this particular deck works makes it definitely classify as burn as well. And I built it somewhere in the region of early 2012, I want to say, early to late 2012. Now, because this is a control deck, it focuses mostly on counter spells and stopping our opponent from doing anything, so we have about 19 different instants here. Beginning with 3 copies of Dispel. Almost every burn or counter spell is instant, so a 1-mana counter is extremely powerful. That's where Dispel comes in. Dissipate is more expensive at 3 mana, but any spell that it counters exiles, which prevents our opponents from actually bringing this back from the graveyard at all. Then we have Electrickery, which was added in Return to Ravnica, and it only deals 1 damage to a creature. But for 2 mana, it can instead overload and deal 1 damage to every creature that isn't mine, which therefore basically hoses most token decks. And then we have Mizium's Skin, which is another 1 mana, and it's more or less the inverse of Electrickery. It gives it gives a target creature, or if I overloaded all of my creatures, +1 toughness, which will completely negate the 1 damage dealt by Electrickery, but it also gives them hexproof for the turn, which prevents my opponents from casting any spells that actually target them, which is also pretty sweet. Then we have Negate, which is free elves here at 2 mana, which just counters target non-creature spell. Most spells that counter are in the sort of like the free bracket on average, so having a 2 mana counter is always very helpful. Then we're getting into some burn here with Searing Spear at free elf and 2 mana, which is strictly worse than Lightning Bolt, because Lightning Bolt does the exact same thing, 3 damage target creature or player, but it costs 1 mana instead of 2. However, when I built this deck in 2012, Standard didn't have access to Lightning Bolt because it was most recently printed then in 2011, and consequently it was not available in M13. But, oh well. If I was to rebuild this deck nowadays, I probably would replace it with Lightning Bolts. And then we have one of arguably the most popular, I'm gonna say, bounce cards, Unsummon. We have 3 of those at 1 mana each. So, 1 mana, instant speed, target creature is returned to its owner's hand. It's always been powerful. You always want to have this in a nice control deck. Doesn't get rid of the creature, but it gets it out of your hair for a moment. Then moving on to the sorceries, we have 2 copies of Index, 1 mana, which allows me to look at the top 5 cards of my deck and rearrange them however the heck I like. Now, when you're dealing with a control deck, you really want to know that you've got answers either coming up soon or, like, very much know when you're getting them. So being able to arrange the next 5 draw steps you have, and then also you get to trigger Gutter Snipe with this, so even better, is pretty great for this deck. Then we have Mizium Mortars, which is 2 ofs and for 2 mana. It deals 4 damage to target creature, but also if we overload it, which admittedly is fairly expensive, about 6 mana, we deal 4 damage to every creature that isn't mine, so it's more or less Electrickery on steroids and a bit slower, but nonetheless it comes in handy quite a bit. Then we have Pillar of Flame, we have 3 of those at 3 mana each. It doesn't do much damage by itself, but its capacity to exile the creatures it destroys makes it harder for the opponents to bring them back, or else profit off them when they would go to the graveyard. Makes zombie decks really, really angry. Then we have Teleportal, which is mostly for the blister coils that we'll talk about in a quick moment, but it gives a target creature +1/+0 and makes them unblockable. It also has Overload, so we can give it to all of our creatures, and if you use it on a blister coil, it actually increases them by +2/+1, which is not nothing. Our singular enchantment in this entire deck is Curiosity. It's 1 mana, which is really freaking cheap, and we have 2 of them. More or less specifically to be used on Gutter Snipe, because the effect of Curiosity is that every single time the enchanted creature deals damage to a player, we get to draw a card. And every time we play a spell, more or less, Gutter Snipe deals damage to every other player. So we're just always drawing cards. And onto the creatures. So I mentioned the blister coils a little earlier. We have 3 of them. They are 1 mana. Having a 1-drop is always helpful. And they're more or less chump blockers, but they give the deck some much needed beef, though they are very much dependent on the number of spells cast in a given turn, so they're less useful on defense. Then again, most of this deck focuses on offense, so we can do a fair bit on the opponent's turn as is. Then we have Fogbank, 3 of them for 2 mana each. These are functionally invulnerable because they neither deal nor receive combat damage, and they have flying, which means that they can block things in the air that would otherwise just go completely over our entire deck. So if there's the slight moment where our counter and burn spells need to have a little bit of a breather, like maybe we need to draw some for instance, the fog banks are very helpful for just keeping us a little bit more protected. And then we come to the centerpiece of the entire deck, the utterly wonderful 3 mana, 4 copies in this deck, Gutter Snipe. I love this guy, he is wonderful. So for every single time we cast an instant or sorcery spell, Gutter Snipe deals 2 damage to each opponent, which means that if we're in a multiplayer game, we're a huge colossal target, but also means that we can deal out some pretty substantial damage just by sheer virtue of casting counter spells. So pretty sweet, pretty sweet. We do have a Planeswalker in here as well. She's 5 mana, she's got just the one of her, and she is from my wonderful, wonderful favorite plane of Kamigawa, which gets a really bad rep. And she was also added way post-brew. I think I got her in like 2013 or something, and she is the 61st card of this deck. If you make magic decks, you generally just want to make sure you have just the 60 cards. But Tameo the Moon Sage here doesn't do terribly much with her two first abilities, but her third ability gives us no maximum hand size, and every time a spell would go to our graveyard, it goes to our hand instead, which makes us able to completely recycle our counter spells basically indefinitely. And then we have, for the land, just 6 islands and 6 mountains, and we also have 4 ghost quarters. Back in the time when this deck was built, there were 51 special lands in Standard at the time, so that includes things like dual lands, and it also includes things like Alchemist's Refuge, Cavern of Souls, and Gavany Township, all of which are kind of a problem. So, Ghost Quarter gave the deck a convenient means of getting rid of them. And then we also have 4 Izzet Guild Gates. 6 and 6, our land pool is pretty evenly split, but a little bit of fixing is always good when you're making a multicolor deck. If I was building this deck for Modern, then I would probably do quite a bit differently. But then again, Modern is a very different kind of environment. There are more recent versions of Ghost Knight than the one I used here, but I don't know if any of them are still in Standard. Probably not. I'd be surprised. But who knows? Lastly, the next vlog should, fingers crossed, go live either right before or shortly after Fuzz and my birthday next week, so look out for a birthday present opening in the next vlog. And that's the end of the good news, I'm afraid. You see this, ostensibly one day after I get paid, and I have a little bit of sour notes on that one. Times are rough on a lot of people now, I'm well aware of this, and also we have had some, significant donation requirements for the last, month or two by virtue of things going wrong. But the actual payout for Patreon this month, covers rent and water, and not much at all else. This includes things like server hosting, internet access, electricity, and food. So, yeah, it's not great. Unfortunately, Fuzz can't even help out in the slightest bit, because, their mother, the eminent Big Bacon, is also hit by these rough times, and can't really support them, so Fuzz doesn't actually get much more in the way of, finance until about September, and their accounts are already in the double digits, approaching the singular, I believe. So, yeah, it's not great. I don't begrudge anyone, withdrawing patronage or anything, because of their own economic strife. I fully understand this. Take care of yourself before you can, worry about me. But, yeah, if you're not a patron, now is certainly a great time to sign up. We have a bunch of, cool stuff going on. And if you are a patron, then share the page. Patreon.com/lying. Spread the word, because pretty much I live or die based on word of mouth, for the most part. There's only so much the YouTube algorithm can claw away from my efforts to expand my community, but, yeah, does really rely on word of mouth. Anyways, with that unfortunate bit of news out of the way, onto the schedule. On Thursday night, 11 PM BST, we have Midnight, where we're taking down the last available Advent facility that isn't in the middle of the sea. Then on Saturday at 9 PM BST, we have more Carousel, where we're spinning the wheel to find out what we're playing, and last time Derry and Dark got into quite a bit of a kerfuffle. Wonder if they're okay this week. And lastly for the week, on Tuesday at 9 PM BST, we have more Building Blocks, where we're going to be starting off on the Various Oddities rework of the Minecraft Vanilla Giants. And videos you might have missed. We have 2 instances of Dailies by Daylight, where Meg has a close call trying to finish 3 different dailies at once, and Detective Tap tackles a more modest 2, featuring patrons Wolfram, Keo, Chombi, and Nigmad. And on to the questions. So as always, these are drawn from the comment section of the preceding vlog. If you have anything to ask me, drop it down below. Our first question of the week comes from Marvelous Holt. Was Sir Lai still held in high regard after getting lycanthropy? Yes. it was very much a known thing that Sir Lang was a werewolf in Baedmon, and it didn't really impact his popularity pretty much at all. He was popular as a monster hunter before he had lycanthropy, and when he had lycanthropy, it was more or less like, oh hey, he got another scar. So, like, and it, to say the least, it definitely made him a bit more, effective, shall we say, at monster hunting. So, it didn't really impact his reputation. It did contribute a bit to being known as the Gilded Fox, but, the actual gilded part was just, oh, he's the golden child. Like, he gets things done, he's well-favored, that kind of thing. Wasn't really actually all that much in the way of affluence, but nonetheless, it wasn't really something he was interested in for the most part. Most of his earnings went back home to his mum. So yeah, was Sir Lang still held in high regard? Yes, absolutely. And Flurrybird asks, have you ever played Subnautica? Would you? I haven't played it. I have heard good things about it. Apparently, the deeper you go, the more nightmarish things get, but then we expect that of the ocean. I would probably give it a look, I'd say. No plans right now, no ideas of if I'd turn it into a whole series, but I'd give it a look, probably. And that's it for this particular week. So, hope you've all enjoyed, bad news notwithstanding. And again, nobody should feel obligated to, like, pledge the Patreon or to donate on streams or anything. Seriously, no one is, like, obligated to help me out. I can't say I know how, but I will probably be fine. It's just gonna be a bit of a tense month. But hey, next week is my birthday, so I got that going for me. Who knows, maybe that alone will bail me out, we'll see. But other than that, I hope you've all enjoyed, and I shall catch you all as ever next time. Ow. That actually sent a tingle through my hands. Ow.